Democrats in Olympia blocked a proposed amendment that would have done one simple thing. It would have said that schools can't have pornographic content in their libraries or in their classrooms. Seems easy, right? No, but Democrats said, we can't have that. Let's talk about it in our segment. Unbelievable. Boop. Okay, so we've talked about this effort. There's a Senate version of the bill. There's a House version of the bill. The House version of the bill is 2331, and it's that inclusive curriculum bill. And it would say that the state is going to mandate that school districts across the state have inclusive curriculums. This might be inclusive for the LGBTQ community, inclusive for students of different races and backgrounds, inclusive for neurodiverse students, etc. So essentially, it wants to make every school district in the state embrace what Seattle has embraced, this DEI, gender ideology sort of curriculum. So there was a hearing on this in the Education Committee over in the Senate. Senator Jim McCune, who is a Republican, introduced what seems like a pretty non-controversial amendment, and it would just say, okay, like you can have your inclusive curriculum, but no porn. Nothing pornographic in nature for our kids. Like, okay, that seems totally reasonable. It says it would prohibit school boards from approving the use of any textbook, instructional material, supplemental instructional material, or other curriculum for student instruction if it contains erotic material, sexually explicit material, or lewd material. And the amendment did go on to define those further, like what does lewd and sexually explicit mean, but we don't have to go through each and every one of those. And this isn't just some manufactured, crazy Republican senator suggesting that we're, reading materials to kids that are pornographic. No, this is happening. He gave a couple book examples, but I just want to point out that we've talked about this on the show. We had a mom, you might remember this was a few months ago, our son's a 10th grader at Lincoln High School in Wallingford in Seattle, and their class had to do a reading of a short story called My Crazy African Mother. Do you remember this? Where it was like this girl, I'll read part of it. Her mom's an African immigrant. She's a first generation American. She's trying to become more Americanized, I guess. So she has this boy over and he's feeling her up on the couch and she doesn't want him to, but he just keeps doing it. It says, he pushes me back, pulls my shirt up so it bunches around my neck, takes my bra off. I feel a sudden coolness on my exposed upper body, sticky, warm moistness on my breast. I once read a book where a man sucked his wife's breast so hard he left nothing for the baby. Matt is sucking like that man. This is just part of it. And then it goes on to talk about her mom catches her and makes her undress from the waist down, lay on her bed with her legs open, and she threatens to put a hot pepper in her vagina. This was read to 10th graders. This student told his mom that girls in the classroom felt so uncomfortable, some wanted to get up to leave, but they weren't allowed to. So this is happening in schools. You have completely inappropriate, sexually explicit content being read to kids. Now, Senator McCune, in his testimony about his amendment, he gave two specific examples, and he didn't even want to read from the books because he said that it was uncomfortable. One of the books is called Jack of Hearts. This is the description on the author of this book's website. Jack has a lot of sex, and he's not ashamed of it. While he's sometimes ostracized and gossip constantly rages about his sex life, Jack always believes that it could be worse. But then the worst unexpectedly strikes. When Jack starts writing a teen sex advice column for an online site, he begins to receive creepy and threatening love letters that attempt to force Jack to curb his sexuality and his personality. Now it's up to Jack and his best friends to uncover the stalker before their love becomes dangerous. He also gave the example of a book called All Boys Aren't Blue. And I went on to kind of read about this book, and I was reading this study guide for it, and it gave a content warning on an online study guide. All Boys Aren't Blue contains sensitive material that may be difficult for some readers. This includes racial slurs, racism, physical and sexual abuse, injury and death, graphic depictions of sexual encounters, bullying and harassment, and anti-LGBTQ language and sentiments. Gee, graphic depictions of sexual encounters? Physical and sexual abuse? So here's Jim McCune wrapping up his testimony on why it would be important to just simply add an amendment to this already controversial bill about inclusive learning that says, hey, no pornographic stuff in our schools.
Pornography books have crept into our schools and our school libraries. This kind of printed visual material of dirty sexual talk and pictures of sexual activity and have no place in our K-12 schools at all.
Yeah, Senator, I agree with you, and I think anyone with an ounce of common sense and sanity agrees with you too, except apparently not Senator Lisa Wellman, who is the chair of this particular education committee.
For someone who has been so often in favor of local control, you are saying that you want the state to override the local control of your local superintendent and the process that is in place to review curriculum and to determine whether it falls into the category that you've said. And for that reason, because I believe that there is local control procedures in place to do exactly that. And I would like to know what school has that. We can look to it in another term. But I am asking, we need to move forward. I'm asking for a no on this, this amendment. And so let's say all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The amendment has failed.
This stuff is unreal. And so she won't even let him give a retort to this. And that was, yes, Democrats on an education committee rejecting an amendment that's only purpose was to make sure that sexually explicit content is not being foisted upon children in K-12 public schools. So that's what you just saw. But I would also say to Senator Wellman, you just made an argument against the entirety of that bill. She tried to use the conservative sort of idea that local control is best, and that's what you hear Republicans, and that is a good point, push for on educational issues. Like, hey, let's leave it to local control. And she says, well, you argue for local control, but you don't want local school districts to control whether there's pornography being taught to students. But in doing that, in saying, she says, I think there's local control, she's undermining the entirety of the bill, because remember the underlying bill that they're discussing. The underlying bill that they're discussing is taking local control away from all the school districts in the state and saying that the state is going to dictate a certain set of inclusivity standards for what kids learn. So she's totally undermined the entire bill. Either you believe in local control or you don't, but also the idea that if you believe in local control, everything has to be local control is also a fallacy. If you're going to say that, then you're going to say that, DUI laws, each individual city can decide how drunk is too drunk for someone to drive. Murder laws or self-defense laws, each individual city can decide whether someone, engaged in an act of self-defense when they shot an intruder. No, there are certain things where it's okay. Let's have statewide rules around this. We have a lot of that with education, some statewide expectations that are reasonable. And then let's leave the rest up to local school districts to do what they see best. But in a situation of pornographic content, why would there shouldn't be any discussion about whether any local school would have a reason on a local level, on a case-by-case basis, to insert pornographic content into lessons. Why would that have to be something that's left up to local control when it's just universally should be agreed that, hey, that's kind of weird. Yeah, let's not read these sorts of books to kids in public schools, even if they're seniors. Democrats actually rejected an amendment to keep pornographic content away from kids. It's unfreaking believable.